I'm going to be talking about the fundamentals of VR, AR education, and I really appreciate the things that Amanda shared, and there's some overlap there. I'm going to be talking about not primarily teaching using VR and AR technology, but why we should be teaching it, why we should be teaching it in the classroom and to our students here. So just to talk a little bit about myself, I've been involved with mobile VR game design for the last 3 years, and this is a screenshot. Actually, a lot of the people that we see in that photo are people working behind the scenes on today's event. This is from an open house last year where we had our students showcase their mobile VR games using Unreal Engine. I'm an instructor in the multimedia production program at Lethbridge College, and like Julie mentioned, last year we put on the world's first full-day conference, Merging Realities, that was held in virtual reality. And so it's been a really passionate focus of mine for the last 3 years. And last year, took on the role of becoming the Alberta Chapter President for the VR AR Association, which is really, and Julie is the Chapter President for the Toronto Chapter. It's really about trying to grow the ecosystem in our areas and unite the industry and really promote the amazing work that's being done in the industry and beyond. So what I really want to talk about when we're looking at VR, AR education is these three tenets there. So why do we need to be teaching this? Why is it so important that students in the K-12 system and in the post-secondary system need to be learning how to create this content? And then what do we create, or sorry, what do we teach them? What are the topics that really are important? And then finally kind of closing off with the how. How do we start getting the students to create content using these two new technologies, sorry. So starting off with the why, I want to tell a bit of a story, and those who saw my slide deck or my tweet will have seen this photo before, and you may be wondering, what the heck does a typewriter have to do with virtual reality? And promise, I will make that connection. But when I was in high school, I took the typing class, and this is a similar typewriter that I used, and I took it to become better at typing on the computer, because we upgraded and used WordPerfect 5.1, which isn't much of an upgrade, but it was. But and did I become a journalist or a receptionist or a typist where I had to use typing every day for my job? No, I didn't. I didn't become a journalist. I didn't use typing every day for my job. But it did allow me to become a better communicator. It allowed me to become a more proficient essay writer for college. It allowed me to be able to search the internet more and be able to be more effective in communicating. And typing for me, whether it's on the keyboard or whatnot, is a digital kind of skill that I have used all through my life since learning it. I mentioned how being able to type helped me be able to browse the internet and surf and be able to do a lot of queries for my essay writing. And speaking about the internet, in the 90s, I remember when I graduated from multimedia production in 1999, the internet was, it was just now becoming a little bit more mainstream, but still a lot of people weren't using it. But the 90s brought the internet, but it also brought something that a lot of us have heard, the topic called digital literacy. Able to communicate or synthesize your findings in a way to others around you. I'm a parent, as some of us in the audience may be, and I've got a number of kids that over the years, I've helped them and watched them kind of create projects where they've had to consume different forms of data, whether it's a PowerPoint or some videos on YouTube, and then be able to create digital content that kind of showcases their findings. So they're inputting digital content, whether it's music or auditory or graphic design or film, and then they're outputting it in creating their own films or their own animations or their own graphic design to kind of showcase the things that they've learned through that process. And it's been a really important skill for these students to learn over the years, but I feel really strongly that we need to add some additional mediums into this concept of digital literacy, both being able to consume and create virtual reality content and be able to consume and create augmented reality content. And I think by adding these two mediums into the skill set when we consider digital literacy for our students, we're preparing them for a future that they will definitely be a part of. As you'll see in a few moments here, this technology is here to stay, and there's a number of statistics that I'll be talking about. of really what makes VR and AR so special. We've heard about it for a while. We're in this conference, we're in VR, talking about VR, but what really is so amazing about it and why is it so important for us to consider? Many of you may have gone to an IMAX about the International Space Station. Many of you may have watched first-hand accounts from the astronauts, but you don't really understand what it's like to be on the space station until you can experience the tight confines of space. This is a VR application made from Oculus, partnered with NASA, that you can download for free, and you're able to actually go through the International Space Station. And when you're actually in that environment, and you feel the close walls around you, and you feel the tightness of space and the kind of isolation of space, then you can actually start to understand and appreciate the work that the astronauts are doing. So for leading up until this, no other medium, whether it's social media, animation, film, written word, has really been able to have the effect on us as a people as virtual reality has today. No other medium can transport us immediately to any time and place similar to this experience that you can download for free. And the reason why it's so important is we are very spatially minded people. If you know anybody who is a fisherman, they often talk about that I caught a fish and it was this big, okay? Because we think with our minds. And so that's why we often talk with our hands, because we are spatially minded. Tom Fernandez, who's often referred to as the grandfather of reality, he's been involved in the industry since the 60s, believe it or not. He's indicated that when you're involved in sensory-rich, immersive experiences, it actually unlocks the spatial memory, and people are able to remember more. There's a study, and if you guys are interested, I encourage you to take a look at it, but there's a study from the University of Maryland that they found that through a number of activities, people who were learning in virtual reality retained the knowledge much easier than any other traditional medium, whether it's lecture, video, or book, because all the senses are firing in our brain: sight, sound, the spatial kind of way that we think. He goes on to say that when you're in a virtual world, it's really like writing on the brain with permanent ink, okay? So it stays with us. I remember hearing about a crane simulator. I think it was Alan Smithson who mentioned to me that it was a colleague of his who went into a crane simulator and within 1 hour, in virtual reality, within 1 hour was able to fully operate the crane simulator, because the spatial parts of our brain are unlocked and we have that muscle memory as well. So these reasons of the spatial awareness and the spatial aspect of our brain are being tapped into through virtuality, and organizations it's a Nielsen company that talks about the forecast revenues for VR and AR over the next few years. So we can see just by looking at it, we're kind of at the beginning here, but within the next 3 years, we're going to see a gigantic growth forecasted in hardware and software revenue for the VR and AR industry. This is because people are realizing the practical benefits that the technology has, even from a brand recollection. So if you created a branded experience in virtuality, those people who participate in that will remember it much more than a video on YouTube or any other kind of ad they might see on a billboard or print. There's a document put out by the Information and Communication Technology Council in Canada. This link is, I will share this link out, but if you want, it's basically bit.ly/nexttalentwave. It goes right to the PDF of this report. And they talk about, and they did a lot of research, but they talk about 5 transformational technologies that they are forecasting will change the way we do business. The first one being virtual and augmented reality. And if you look at these, what I find really interesting with all of these technologies they're forecasting, which will be transformational, is there's a very tight overlap between all of them. 5th generation or 5G mobile technology is going to have a huge impact on VR and AR. Blockchain is already being used in that space. There's a company, I believe, out of Toronto that is using blockchain to be able to sell VR assets in the VR space. And artificial intelligence is being used both for VR and AR. So there's a very tight overlap with all these technologies. Further into the report, they talk about how from a Heather Bellini at Goldman Sachs Research, that indicates that they strongly believe that the VR and AR technology has the potential to transform how we interact with almost any industry. I firmly believe this is true. I firmly believe that there's not one industry that really can't benefit from some aspect of this technology. Whether you're teaching in the ECE program with students who are going to be working with young children and creating a empathy, a 4 or 5-year-old having a tall person talk down to them, to things that we talked about, that Alex Jackson talked about in medical and beyond. Every industry really has the ability to have VR and AR have positive influences in their industry going forward. Further in the report, and this one is a really kind of interesting kind of quote to take in, but the folks at Goldman Sachs Research are convinced that both VR and AR has the potential of being as revolutionary or as game-changing as the advent of the personal computer. So just think about that for a moment. I recall, I don't know how many of you do, but I recall when I got my first computer and how amazing it was. My first real computer was an Atari that I could type on and put code in. But I remember when I got my first computer where it actually could play video. Because up until that point, I couldn't play video. The processing power wasn't there. And I was amazed. And now look at where we've come over the last 20 years. So this technology, while we're still in the infancy, as many people will state, the potential is great that it's going to revolutionize the way we do business, the way we learn, the way we communicate. So I've talked about the why, hopefully set a kind of a picture as to why this technology is important to teach our students at whatever level. What I want to talk about for a few moments now is what. What do they need to be taught? Because there's a wide array of possibilities of what they can be taught, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So I've kind of broken it down into three, what I feel are the key areas to focus on. The first one being spatial. And what I mean by that, up until now, when they've created, it's been in a very 2D environment, even in 3D animation, because you're looking at it on a 2D plane on your computer screen. So having the students be able to think spatially, things like scale and proximity and location will really help them be able to be prepared to enter into the space as a developer or as a creator of content. And some ways that you can look at doing that is really focusing in, even in the physical world, the idea of scale, proximity, depth, those kind of things that will help them translate well into developing for virtual and augmented reality. The second area is UX, or user experience design. I really like that Amanda's writing a book for kids about design thinking, because I think that that is a really important skill set in this new industry that they need to really be aware of and have an understanding of how to apply it. As we can probably all attest, when we played with a virtual reality experience, often it doesn't go quite as planned. And so being able to understand the design testing process, designing for a particular user and understanding their needs is a really important skill set to have. And then the final kind of skill set is really that I want to have us focus on is on coding. Whether you're creating 360 video or AR apps or VR apps, kind of at the baseline is an understanding of coding, whether you're doing it in Unity or Unreal Engine or any other platform. I firmly believe that coding is, and I've said this before in real life, that coding is really the only universal language. A Boolean is a Boolean no matter what country you're in. There might be different letters around it, but the logic behind it is the same no matter what. And so I really think that teaching coding at an early age will help them, not just if they want to become creators of VR, AR content, but will help them create and communicate in the new industry, which will rely heavily on an understanding of coding and programming logic. So that's led us to create the Virtual and Augmented Reality program at Lethbridge College. We've taken these three pillars that I mentioned just before and have weaved them in and out, and you'll see in a few moments, we've weaved them in and out through the development of the curriculum for the program. So it's a one-year certificate. We will focus on the aspect of spatial design, user testing, coding, and more, which I'll talk about. And we were really, as we went through that process, we really looked at four main kind of themes that we wanted to see within that program. As you can see, spatial is up there, but also fundamentals, understanding things like inside-out tracking, terminology, how the hardware works, the pros and cons of different ways of using technology. The experiential is really focusing on having the students be able to create experiences that they can share with others. And then the final pillar that we are focusing on is on the application. So they'll be working with industry partners to develop real-world solutions to problems that these partners may be encountering. So they're really kind of looking at this as the pillar, and all these are weaved throughout all the courses. We were really fortunate as we developed the curriculum to work with a number of partners, and here are some of the partners that we worked with in a consultant capacity to help guide us through the creating of the curriculum. Metaverse, obviously, they're here with us today. Mammoth, who they're actually with us on site to showcase some of their amazing work. And actually, I believe all of these partners, with the exception of the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford, are physically here with us, well, physically or virtually, Alan and Julie, with us today. And I was really honored that Jeremy Bailenson from Stanford, who runs the Virtual Human Interaction Lab, took a few moments out of his time last summer when we were doing the visioning session to give us some guidance as to how we should direct the curriculum development. So without these partners and others who were involved, the creation of this program that we have today wouldn't have been possible. So again, thank you for all your support on that. So when we look at the work that we've done leading up to the planning, here's a real high level as to the topics that we're including in the one-year certificate program. Immersive audio, there's a whole course on immersive audio because of the importance of spatial audio in establishing presence and establishing the immersive aspect of the experience. Teaching VR and AR concepts, 3D modeling, photogrammetry. I won't read this list here, but we really have a wide gamut as to the variety of topics that we include in this certificate because the immersive technologies is such a wide space. We really want to make sure that the students who have come through this program really are able to understand all the aspects that they may be encountering as a developer or as a future developer in the industry. So how? I've talked about the why, I've talked a little bit about the what, and how do we get started? Amanda gave some really good advice that I'm going to build off of, but one of my key things I want to leave with you is to really consider starting small. There are so many possibilities that you could look at, both with VR, AR, 360 video, where it could actually be a bit intimidating and overwhelming. So what I would encourage you to do is to pick one platform and look at doing that going forward here. A couple of platforms Amanda mentioned, Art of Live and HP Reveal. If you want to be able to have your students create 360 experiences, there's one called ThinkLink and Tour Creator, which is by Google. All these have free pricing packages that you can play with. If you want to dive into a little bit more in depth, Amazon Sumerian, which is from Amazon, is a web-based VR AR platform. And what's great about Amazon Sumerian is you don't have to be a coder. If you are, it's great. But through their platform, you're able to create interactions without understanding how to type a letter of code. And then Amanda had mentioned CoSpaces EDU, and what's really great, and I encourage you to take a look at videos online. There is an add-on for the Merge Cube that will allow you to create interactive AR experiences where the students can actually develop the logic behind those. So going back to the typewriter, what does the typewriter have to do with VR? The skills that you teach you, but hopefully teach your students in relation to creating VR content. They may not become VR developers and work for Oculus or work for HTC, but they will become more proficient in being able to communicate in the new industry, in the new technologies that will be going forward here, as I hopefully had demonstrated. So that's what I'm talking about, is you're not training developers, you are training people to be able to be better communicators in this new industry. And I want to leave with this quote that's on our on our college page for the VR program, a future as limitless as your imagination. I encourage you to have some fun with teaching your students how to create this new content in this new industry and go forward here and have fun. Thank you so much for your time.